Welcome to a recap of the Stormlight Archive series, which will prepare you for the newest book, Rhythm of War. Let's begin with a quick overview of the world itself. Roshar is a harsh, rocky world with colossal high storms sweeping across the continent on a regular basis. Yet the planet is teeming with alien life that has adapted to the extreme environment. Trees brace for storms, grass retracts into the ground, and native animals have hardened shells. Also native to Roshar is a sapient humanoid species called Singers, also called Parshmen, Parshendi, or the Listeners in the early books. The flora and fauna aren't the only alien aspect of Roshar, however. Forces of nature and ideas come to life in the form of magical spren, sprite-like creatures which can appear out of nowhere, drawn by human emotions or acts of nature. These spren are but a glimpse into an entirely separate, overlapping realm called the cognitive realm, or simply Shadesmar, where the spren have a more fully realized form. The various sapient species of spren even have cities, culture, and a civilization of their own. Spren aren't entirely detached from the physical realm, however, as they play an important role on several levels. They have formed bonds with animal life, enabling the development of creatures with remarkable size or magical abilities. The native Singers have also learned to bond with spren in their own way by taking the spren into a natural gemstone within their bodies, called gem hearts, which causes a dramatic change in their psychology or physiology depending on the type of spren. Spren have even developed a special sort of bond with some humans, allowing those humans to access the powers of surge binding, manipulation of surges, the fundamental forces like gravity or friction that drive the world. Behind the magic of Roshar are beings of godlike power called shards. There are 3 shards of note where Roshar is concerned, each named after an ideal which governs the nature of that power. The first 2, honor and cultivation, arrived long in the past. The third, odium, arrived shortly after the original human migration to Roshar. The conflict between these 3 beings is what the story of the Stormlight Archive is all about. Now, let's quickly go through some history, and we'll begin with one of the big reveals that took place at the end of the Oathbringer. And that was that the humans are Voidbringers, at least from a certain point of view. The Singers called Roshar home even before honor and cultivation had arrived. At a later point still, Odium managed to influence the humans to show up on Roshar's doorstep after destroying their own homeworld with magic. Honor and cultivation encouraged the Singers to welcome these refugees, but it didn't take long for things to go terribly, and a war broke out. Odium lent some of his powers to create the Fused, who were Singer souls who, upon death, could take over the body of another. These beings, effectively immortal and with access to surges, were joined by the Regals, Thunderclasts, and the Unmade. To counter Odium's forces, Honor empowered his heralds, 10 immortal humans with 10 powerful honor blades. The Oath Pact was established as a means to limit Odium's forces. Thus began the Desolations. With each desolation, Odium's forces would return to Roshar and the war would begin anew. Though the humans were always ultimately victorious, the cycle wore down the resolve of the heralds as they returned to damnation after each desolation, where they would be tortured until the point of breaking. During this time, humans began to ally and bond with intelligent spren. This bond granted humans access to shard blades, shard plate, and various forms of surge binding. These surge binders organized and became known as the Knights Radiant. With their headquarters in the Tower City of Urithiru and their philosophies inspired by Noadon, the author of the Way of Kings, they afforded some stability amid the desolations. But even they could only do so much. After a series of particularly challenging desolations, 9 of the heralds abandoned the Oath Pact, leaving the 10th, Taln, to bear damnation on his own. Under Taln's resolve alone, the cycle of desolations nearly halted. After the last desolation, Odium's forces did not gather again for thousands of years. When they did, during the so-called False Desolation, it was without the support of the Fused, who were bound by Taln. The humans were victorious again in that war, but at a great cost. Honor himself was slowly dying, and the integrity of the Knights Radiant was collapsing with him. When the Singers were defeated, most were magically lobotomized as servile Parshmen. Also, most of the Knights Radiant abandoned their oaths leaving behind their bonded spren dead in the form of shardplate and shardblades. This event became known as the Recreants. Time passed, and power was reconsolidated. The Silver Kingdoms warped into the nations of modern Roshar, and new religions developed. In eastern Roshar, the Voran Church gained significant political influence and encouraged extensive revisionist history before the Sunmaker ended their hierarchy. And so it was, until the Alethi King Gavilar discovered a rogue band of intelligent singers, and the Herald Taln's resolve began to waver. The novels open with the assassination of Gavilar, Dalinar's elder brother, at the hand of Szeth, the assassin in white, who was hired by the Parshendi on the very night they planned to sign a peace treaty. We learned from Eshonai and Oathbringer that Gavilar planned to bring back the Fused, something that the Parshendi wanted no part in. While Gavilar's own dealings and motives were surrounded in mystery, the result of his assassination was simple for Dalinar and the Alethi, who swore vengeance upon the Parshendi. Thus began the War of the Reckoning, with the Alethi laying siege to the Parshendi on the Shattered Plains. Over the course of the novels, Dalinar discovered, through visions granted by the Stormfather, that their god Honor was dead, and that a new desolation would soon arrive. Dalinar united as many of the Alethi High Princes as he could, and assaulted the Parshendi at the center of the Shattered Plains. Though they technically won the battle, the listeners succeeded in mustering the Everstorm, and as the Everstorm swept across Roshar, it restored the minds of Parshmen worldwide. With the Everstorm also came the Voidspren, Fused, and a stronger presence of Odium himself, who organized these former slaves and ignited a global war with the humans. The humans rediscovered the ancient city of Urithiru, with oath gates allowing for faster travel, and allied together into a loose coalition against Odium's forces. The two sides ultimately clashed at the Battle of Thaylen Field, where Dalinar seized fragments of Honor's power and temporarily repelled the Shard of Odium. Each book in the series has a focus character whose backstory is explored. The focus character from the first book, The Way of Kings, is Kaladin, renowned as Kaladin Stormblessed, a dark-eyed windrunner of the Knights Radiant from Alethkar. Despite being trained as a surgeon from an early age by his father, his chosen profession is that of a soldier. He is famed as the captain of High Prince Dalinar's personal guard, a unit known as Bridge 4, and commander of the Bridgeman Battalion. Cal has known adversity and loss throughout his life, and has been unable to save numerous patients, comrades, subordinates, and even his brother Tian from death. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, Kaladin is driven to protect others. He has bonded with the Honor Spren Syl. This bond allows him to discover his powers as a Surgebinder and destiny as a member of the Knights Radiant. After Kaladin experienced a vision suggesting that Dalinar would soon be in danger, Cal and a small team journeyed through Shadesmar, where Kaladin failed to speak his fourth ideal with the team in mortal danger. Saved by Dalinar, the team was returned to the physical realm, where Kaladin fought and helped defeat Amaram, who had been consumed by the unmade Yelignar. Shallan is the focus character of the second book of the series, Words of Radiance. Shallan is also known as Veil or Radiant. She is a light-eyed light weaver of the Knights Radiant from Yakaved. Shallan is an emerging scholar whose great achievement is the discovery of the legendary city Urithiru. She is also renowned for her extraordinary talent of accurately reproducing fleeting scenes with photographic accuracy. While acting as an apprentice to Jasnah Kholin, she became the casual betrothed of Jasnah's cousin, Prince Adolin, who she later married following the Battle of Thaylen Field. She also learns of and shares Jasnah's quest to stop the mysterious and calamitous Voidbringers. Shallan has a bond with the cryptic Pattern, allowing her to manifest Pattern as a Shardblade and giving her access to powers as a Surgebinder. Eventually, during the Battle of Narak, her bond with Pattern allowed her to become the first Lightweaver to be revealed as a Knight Radiant since the Recreants. The focus character of the third book, Oathbringer, is Dalinar, also known as Blackthorn. He is an Alethi member of the Order of Bondsmiths, bonded to the Stormfather. He is the de facto leader of the reformed Knights Radiant. He's also the younger brother of Gavilar and uncle of past King Elhokar and current Queen of Alethkar, Jasnah Kholin. He is currently married to Brightness Nirvani Kholin, Gavilar's widow. He has 2 sons, Adolin and Renarin, from Evi, his first wife. Before he renounced the title, letting Adolin take over his place, Dalinar was the High Prince of his princedom. After Dalinar's early years of war, his resolve began to shift in a new direction. Strange visions granted by the Stormfather ultimately revealed to him that their god almighty, Honor, was dead at the hand of Odium. After facing the Parshendi in the center of the Shattered Plains and surviving the first ever storm, Dalinar established a new base of operations in the lost mythical city of Urithiru. His mission of uniting the High Princes quickly grew to including uniting all the nations of Roshar and re-establishing the Forgotten Orders of the Knights Radiant. Dalinar also learned of Taravangian's dealings with Seth. Though things may look bleak, Dalinar was able to confront his dark past at the Battle of Thaylen Field and to move past it, thwarting Odium's plan to make Dalinar his own champion. Seizing fragments of Honor's power, Dalinar halted Odium's advance and earned the humans a much-needed victory, or at least a reprieve. Mr. Sanderson has confirmed that in the upcoming book, Rythm of War, the focus characters will be Eshonai and Venli. These sisters are listeners, an independent nation of singers who rejected their gods, the Fused, toward the end of the Desolations and thus were unaffected during the events which left most singers as near mindless parshmen. Small in number, their tribes went unnoticed in the eastern wilderness for thousands of years until they were discovered by Dalinar and Gavilar during a hunting expedition. Gavilar took an unexplained interest in the listeners and ultimately invited them to Kholanar to sign a treaty between their peoples. On the night the treaty was to be signed and Gavilar was assassinated, Gavilar showed Eshonai a strange dark sphere and spoke of the return of the listener gods. Eshonai reported what happened to her leaders, who decided that very evening that Gavilar must be killed. Eshonai longed for peace with the humans, despite her position as a shard-bearer and general of the listener army on the Shattered Plains, but she was willing to pay any cost to prevent the return of the listener gods. This changed when her sister Venli's research uncovered a new spren that would grant a form of power called Storm Form. Eshonai volunteered to test the new form, which tragically altered her mind. After nearly destroying the listener people entirely and summoning the Everstorm, Eshonai fell to her death in the chasms. Before her transition to Stormform, Eshonai attracted Timber, a rebellious light spren in who, against all precedents, sought to form a bond with a singer rather than a human. After Eshonai's death, Timber began to quietly follow her sister, Venli. Venli, far less altruistic than her sister, expected the return of the singer gods to bring personal fame and renown, but instead, all she found was frustration and bitterness. Her people were rejected as traitors, and Venli's own efforts were largely disregarded. After her loved ones were left dead at the hands of humans, or fused, Venli was claimed by Odium to be his ambassador to the newly awakened singers on Roshar. Unwilling to accept the mistreatment of her people at the hands of the humans, but also disillusioned by their abuse under the rule of Odium, Venli was left with few allies beyond Timber, whom she began to bond with following the Battle of Thaylen Field. Thank you for listening to this recap of Stormlight Archive leading up to the Rythm of War. Please leave a like and subscribe if you appreciated the recap. I hope you enjoyed the new book.